find out whether the government is doing enough to deal with climate change, I'm joined by Morne du Plessis. He's the CEO of the World Wildlife Fund in South Africa. Morne joins us now via Skype, I believe. Good afternoon to you, Morne, and thank you for your time. So how have you been marking this important day?
Well, I think just listening to that clip of young people speaking around the world fills one with enthusiasm for the cause. Unfortunately, I think environmentalists tend to make things sound very negative, and I think the upside of this is that we actually can do something about the crisis that these kids are describing, and the answer is in our hands.
I want us to talk about the South African context in particular, because we were hearing from Greta there. She was speaking at that rally in London by these climate change or protesters who've gathered now for days, really. But when you look at the South African context, we are in an election year. Climate change doesn't seem to be coming up at the top of the agenda from the various political parties in their campaigning. What does that tell us then about South Africa's priority list and where climate change sits?
Look, South Africa is a country with many immediate challenges, and I think, sadly, the issue of climate change has fallen off the table for most of the parties. We don't hear much, as you say, and of course that's concerning. The reality is that with immediate issues of corruption that needs to be dealt with, issues of services, of access to water, access to energy, service delivery, these issues are very immediate, and then it becomes very difficult for politicians to use climate change as a platform, particularly in a developing country, from which to argue. But as I said earlier, it's easy to see the glass is half empty. The half full side of it for me is that as soon as the elections are over, we can get on with serious business. We can deal with the issues that really matter rather than the rhetoric. And I think that's the way elections play themselves out anywhere in the world.
Let's speak about the 2016 Climate Change Accord. When it was signed, there was a lot of hope, a lot of faith that it would be able to help many countries come back from the brink as far as destruction of the environment is concerned. We know the United States under Donald Trump has subsequently pulled out. But do you believe that the accord has lived up to what it was meant to be upon its signing in 2016?
I would be lying if I said that it's lived up to what it set out to do. I think there's been many steps backwards, and many of us know that it takes one prominent politician of a leading country in the world to step onto a platform and undo a lot of the good that had been done. And here I'm talking about President Trump. So without blaming him solely for the lack of action, I think one could also see some very positive signals out of countries like the USA, where despite the fact that their president appears to be a climate denialist and is surrounding himself with people who do not take climate change as seriously as they should, we're still seeing that cities, even states, and individual corporations are taking actions far beyond what the state of the United States would have required of them. And that, for me, is a very positive signal. And I think we need to take great courage from the fact that there's an awakening. These young kids, the Greta Thunberg from Sweden, around the world, and many like them, are standing up and, you know, in the business environment, you'd have to be sleeping at the wheel if you don't take it seriously, that you see that kids are understanding some of these issues far better than those of us who are making decisions right now. The future is really in their hands.
Morne, the issue of shale gas exploration, especially in areas such as the Karoo here at home, has been quite controversial in the last, 10 years or so, I would say. We know that there was a court battle over the terms, the legal aspects of fracking in that part of the country, but messaging from the government, especially from the likes of the Mineral Resources Minister, Gwede Mandasha, is that government is going to push ahead with exploration. Is that a lost battle for environmentalists in this country, do you think?
No, I do not think so. I think that You know, many of these things, even recent wet gas discovery off the coast of Mossel Bay, about 170 kilometers into the ocean, was described even by the president in one of his major speeches this year as a game changer. Well, it's a long way away from being a game changer. You know, the real game changer at this point is the price of electricity generated by renewables. It keeps coming down and down and down, and so no fossil fuel. And remember, shale gas, as well as wet gas out in the ocean, as well as oil, these are all fossil fuels. These are carbon-based fuels that have locked up carbon from the atmosphere, and it should stay that way. We do not want to burn every single fossil fuel resource in the world, and therefore I think the simple economics will come to the aid of environmentalists. It's just a huge pity that such significant interests, vested interests of existing reserves of fossil fuels, which are pretty much stranded.
Environment. How does South Africa strike that balance?
Look, you described something that is very, very real, and this is what decision makers have to sit with on a daily basis. Now, the reality is that we cannot flick a switch and move from one state to another in a matter of days, weeks, or months. We in the environmental world talk about a transition towards a low-carbon economy. When we talk about a transition, many of us are busy and working very hard to try, and we're discussing this with labor unions, with business, and with society in general, to make sure that people understand that there is a future, a job-rich future for renewable energy, and that when we transition, we have to make sure that we take people with us. So if we bring renewable energy in drips and drabs onto our grid, then we will never create the scale at which we can get local industries to manufacture components that are necessary for this renewable energy. So when you say that many people still seek access to electricity, of course, the easiest way to do this is to go off-grid, to produce small-scale, smart energy solutions for people who are without those at the moment. And there are many, many initiatives across the country and across the world, in fact, that are going on to work away from a system where we depend on a single, large, monolithic, prehistoric energy production system that the likes of Eskom, to provide energy for every single person in South Africa. It's much easier, much cheaper to get somebody off the grid in a small village, in a rural setting, to get onto renewable energy and to benefit from a clean, sustainable future.
Morne du Plessis, thank you so much for your time on this public holiday. And that is where I leave it with you for today. Back with you.